Serious, forensic investigators of Reddit, what are some of the most disturbing and horrific cases you've worked on? EMT. Not my call but my co-workers. Get dispatched for vaginal bleeding. Arrive at the home to find a woman sitting in a pool of blood on her bedroom floor. Transport her to the hospital where the doc examines her. He asks where the baby is. What? He states this woman just had a baby. So they go back to the home with police and search the place. My co-worker looks under the bed and sees a bowling ball bag. Opens the bag and finds the strangled dead baby. I'm an expert in work-related incidents, and am hired to investigate accidents and incidents for large corporations. 2 children fell down an elevator shaft on a building project. Employee of manufacturer in the pharmaceutical industry got his arm ripped off by a powder centrifuge. Retired person was fatally hit by the coupling of a compressed air hose after the hose broke. Worked a case involving 2 young sisters, 8 and 4, it was actually 13 and 6, if I recall. This was 20 years ago, and their meth head mom and her boyfriend. Mom was convinced her girls were possessed by demons, so she forced them to take baths in bleach. When that didn't work, she started making them drink bleach. The older girl knew enough to immediately throw up the bleach, and she would drag her sister behind the couches or wherever they could in the house to throw it up. Eventually the little daughter couldn't throw it up anymore and died. She then froze the little sister, and proceeded to hack the frozen body into pieces in front of the older sister, and then disposed of the pieces somehow. We were sent in to see if we could find the body. Walking into that house, the smell of bleach was overwhelming, and I can still remember all the bleach stains on the carpet. Edit, for those asking about the sentence, here is a link to the story. Changed age of girls from 8 and 4 to 13 and 6. 15-year-old decided to commit suicide on the freeway. It's still not 100% clear if he jumped off the overpass first, but he was reported to be seen on the ground on the freeway by the first person who called it in, who was also the 3rd car to hit him in a matter of minutes. I didn't even have to cut to do the autopsy, we were able to get what we needed through the gaps in his broken spine. I do fire investigation, and one that stuck with me was a likely mentally disturbed girl started speaking to God at the dinner table and then that night lit her room on fire with her in it. I think about that one a lot. Back in my forensic anthropology student days, we worked on an unknown, unclaimed skeleton for class. We'd analyze these skeletons for class as part of our weekly projects. The story goes this: Jane Doe was new in town but made some fast acquaintances at a local bar. Jane Doe and her 3 new friends get the bright idea to go rob the local motorcycle gang. The gang has a house in town, but they're not there right now. Just a couple of their old ladies. So these 4 brain surgeons come up with a plan. Jane Doe and another woman will go up to the door in a panic. They'll bang on the door and scream for help. The 2 guys would wait in the bushes and spring out once the door is opened. Then they could rob the house. So with plan in hand, they get to the house. Jane Doe and the lady run up and start banging on the door, screaming bloody murder about someone bring after them. Inside are 2 of the gang's girlfriends/wives. They figure something is up. One gets a shotgun, one gets on the phone and dials 911. The women outside are banging so hard on the door it begins to break and come apart. Lady with the shotgun is scared and has it pointed at the door. The door breaks open and Jane Doe is the first through the door. Shotgun lady lets both barrels rip and deletes Jane Doe's face from eyebrows to chin. This was back in the 90s. I wonder if they ever figured out who she was. A man decapitated his infant son with a samurai sword while high on PCP. That's up there for me. Had a paranoid schizophrenic male who forced his elderly mother to eat rocks, and I mean a shitload of rocks, to the point where she died. He told police that he was feeding her rocks to weigh her down so God couldn't take her yet. I did a case once where the home had burnt down. As was always the case, the homeowner was asked to provide a list of everything in the home. Tip: make this list before your house burns down. Most people, not this guy, can't remember, and this is how insurers shortchange you. But I digress. So homeowner emails me a list, all 190 pages of size 12 Arial print single spaces. The first 48 pages were all the books in the house. Every single book, and I mean all of them, over 3,200 in total, were biographies, memoirs and other books related to serial killers. And then, as if to prove the old saying, it is the ones you least suspect, he was a normal dude, middle age etc., wife, 2 kids and so on. Police arrested him 2 months later when the house was demolished and 6 bodies were found in the crawl space under the house. I was completing my master's in forensics, anthropology, and put it on hold as I got offered a job in child protection. I've seen some fucked up shit in terms of child deaths, rape cases and severe neglect. The cases that make me sad though is when kids have been so traumatized from being sexually abused that they do it to other children. Or animals. I held my cats and didn't allow them outside for so long after working with those cases. Long story short, arson case. 2 kids die. Lady who started the fire also lived in the house but got kicked out by the owners for whatever reason. She had a previous felony arson charge. They found her a few days later living with her boyfriend in a tent with multiple gas cans. She was arrested and released with charges completely dropped. That's when I realized 1, how fucked our judicial system truly is, and 2, I didn't want to investigate homicides anymore. I'm still fresh in the field and don't have any super horrific stories, but I interned with a police department while working towards my master's. I went to a scene with a deceased adult male. Suspected overdose and very recent, he was dead for around 8 hours, ick. Nothing gruesome, but his parents found him. They were crying in the next room as an officer spoke with them. At some point we went into the deceased's bedroom, which he shared with his toddler, and I distinctly remember seeing all the toys on the floor and how they were the same ones my little cousins had. I started getting a bit emotional, but then we found bags of powder hidden in the child's clothing drawer. At the university, I took a medico-legal investigation course that was taught by a medical examiner. Lots of case photos, but the one I remember was of a suicide bomber. The explosives he had wrapped around himself exploded downwards. Everything below the waist was either gone or a tangled mess, but his top half looked completely untouched. I also did a mock reconstruction report for the 1970 MacDonald murders. I had access to scene and autopsy photos, including those of the children. These were almost 50-year-old pictures, so the quality was not the greatest, but I don't think I'll forget them for a long time. Okay, this dates back many years to my time as a US Army SID criminal investigator. I was working a fraud case against a soldier, whom I'll call Sturgis, who had been collecting housing allowance, but actually living in his car. Total was about $11,000, so it's not like he was looking at prison time or anything. Worst case scenario was a dishonorable discharge. But his company XO made a hobby out of making this guy's life miserable while the investigation was going on. He personally escorted the guy to all his meetings with me, the JAG office, and other than that he was basically on full lockdown. One day they had an extended field exercise, still on base, but sleeping in tents for a few days and doing, I don't know, infantry stuff. When they got back to the company grounds, everyone lined up at the arms room turn in their M16s and other various weaponry, but Sturgis instead walked out into the middle of the parade ground and sat down. The XO came out after him, yelling all the way about what a world of shit he was going to rain down on him. Sturgis stood up and shot him full auto with ammo he'd pocketed from the range. Stitched him from groin to neck. Then Sturgis sat back down and put the muzzle to his eye socket and held the trigger down for as long as he could. Once the duty agent who got the call put together who the cast of characters was, he called me since I had the existing case file. When I got there the XO's body was gone. They'd taken him to the ER but DOA. Sturgis they didn't bother with since his head looked like a deflated basketball. Turned out that the bullet from his rifle went right through his brain and shattered the top of his skull, and the muzzle gas pushed his brain completely out of his skull. One perfect hemisphere was laying next to him, the other a surprisingly long distance away, and had landed in an anthill and was crawling with ants. I used a tongue depressor to roll the loose parts of Sturgis into a plastic bag. His autopsy was the next day, and I attended to take photographs, for the file, not a personal thing. That was almost 30 years ago, and I can still hear the medical examiner say, "Ugh, there's fucking ants all over this thing." Like, sorry dude, was that the thing that made this job too real for you? Digital forensics here. I had to sit through a film of a blindfolded, screaming 8-year-old girl being abused every way you can imagine by two overweight Russian men. The film lasted about 3 hours, and the abuse would have caused her permanent injury. The denouement was where the bag was taken off her head and a gun was presented to her face. If you've never seen a small child suddenly realize their own mortality, then I suggest you never do. One of them pulled the trigger and her head disintegrated in a shower of red mist and brains. The other held up a newspaper which was to show the date. The film had been commissioned by someone else who wanted this to happen, presumably so he could jerk off to it. Humanity is fucked.